Okay, good morning. Sorry about the late start. We are on the home stretch. So we're looking at Davidson's Reality Without Reference article today and Monday. And the position we got to, or at any rate, the position I think we got to last time, was that we could go along with Wittgenstein in his negative thing about use being more basic than knowledge of truth conditions. You don't derive your ability to use a word from something more basic. That's a familiar idea at any rate at this point. But you could still keep a role for truth conditions and say you've got to be able to say what the truth conditions of a saying you're using are to make your use of it intelligible. So the problem with tonk or all these other bits of bad language, I mean, tonk is like just a bit of bad language, right? And the problem with all these bits of bad language is you have no way of saying what it is for sentences using them to be true. And you could think of knowledge of what has to be the case for a sentence to be true as knowledge of what you're up to, what you're about, what you're doing with that sentence, is having some insight into what your objective is in using the sentence the way you do. And that's why skeptical questions can seem to make sense, because on the one hand you've got this conception of what it is for the sentence to be true, and on the other hand these ways of using the sentence that are supposed to achieve their objective of finding whether the sentence is true. Okay? So the first section here is a complete copy of slides I showed you in the very first lecture of the class. The room was a little bit different in that first lecture, and it was very hard to concentrate, right? But let's take another look at them, see if you remember them partly. So remember in the first day of class we looked at this general question, what's a theory of meaning anyway? The class is called Theory of Meaning. And there are two ways that the idea of a theory of meaning is used in the literature. One is, and the way we're using it through most of the classes, theory of meaning just means general ruminations as to what meaning is, what reference is, what truth is, that kind of thing. So all of Wittgenstein stuff would count as theory of meaning in that ruminative kind of sense. But another sharper way of using theory of meaning is to say it's going to be a theory of meaning for English will be a specification for each sentence of English of what it means. Yeah? That's two different ways of using the term theory of meaning. So the second way, you've got to have some particular method for specifying the meaning of a sentence. Then you apply that to the terms of to the language generally. And Davidson said, the way you should do, this is one of the things that was so great about Davidson's way of organizing the subject, and it's there in that Reality Without Reference paper, that the way you should approach this business of having general ruminations about meaning is to ask the question, how do I do this? How do I give a specification for each sentence of a language of what it means? This is a relatively sharp question, and the idea is that the systematic way to approach one, rather than just having a lot of agreeable chat about things, is to ask, how do I go about doing two? So the way to do the philosophy of meaning in general is to ask, how should you go about specifying the meaning of each term in some particular language? So the way to address question one is by addressing question two, or asking rather what the right way is to approach question two. You see what I mean? And there was this distinction we had, you remember, between the meta-language and the object language? The idea being that there's a language you're studying and there's a language you talk about, the language you're studying, if you see what I mean. And generally it's usually taken that we can regard some fragment of English, maybe some pretty big fragment, as our object language, but use English itself to talk about that fragment of English. Do you see what I mean? And then Davidson's idea was, let's approach this by looking at the definition of truth for a language. So suppose that your meta-language has a translation or a copy of everything. I'm going to go over this quite quickly because I suppose it's familiar, but stop me if anything here, anyone stop me if anything here isn't clear. So suppose your meta-language is quite rich. The language you're talking about, the language you're studying, is quite rich. So for every sentence in the language you're studying, the target language, there is another sentence in the meta-language, the language that you're using as a theorist, that has the same meaning as that sentence in the object language. I suppose you've got a name for every sentence in the object language and your basic vocabulary. So if you take this sentence, snow is white, as a sentence of the object language, you want to give it a name, or you can name it, you could call it something like Max, or you could name it using quotation marks. So when you've got that, you've got a name for every sentence in your target language, and you've got a translation or a copy of every sentence in your object language. Then you can say, the way I explain truth here is by saying, for each sentence of my object language, I say S is true if and only if P, where S is the name of a sentence, and I replace P by the translation or copy of that sentence. I'm going over this a little bit fast, but I hope the ideas are clear. Yeah? Okay. I mean, when you spell this out, I mean, what would be an example of this S is true if and only if P? What would be an instance? Aha. Yes? Yes, perfect. Yes, right. Yeah, with quotes around one of the snow is white. Which one? The first one, very good. That's right. Okay. Any other examples? Hello? Pigs like peanuts is true if and only if pigs like peanuts. You're getting the hang of it. Any other examples? Or is that it really? Does it get too hard after that? Yes? Ah, very good. Yes. Sentences like "I am here" are tricky, right? And traditionally, I mean, when Davidson was setting out this project, have been ignored. But nowadays, these are really the focus of so much work in philosophy of language. But a starting way of getting it would be to say S as uttered by P at T, right? But S as uttered by the person at a time, at a place, is true if and only if that person is at that time, at that place. Something like that, So you're right, the structure needs to be a bit more complicated. In fact, arguably, it needs to be a lot more complicated to accommodate context sensitivity. But for our purposes, what about grass is green? The sentence grass is green? Just one last one. Just anyone? Yes? Grass is green is true if and only if. Right. Because that's, it's important. That's a subject predicate, right? Yeah. But that's right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, if you take something like water and as used in twin earth and water is used on earth, right? You don't want ambiguity in between the sentence you're picking out in the first bit and the sentence you're using in the second bit. Yeah. So I agree. You've just got to watch that. Well, yeah. there are a number of subtle issues about how you exactly you handle a proper name, for example, in this framework. So if you say Bill Clinton is a former president, is true if and only if, right, then you want, when you use the name Bill Clinton in the second bit, yeah, if it's true if and only if Bill Clinton is a former president, yeah, then you want that Bill Clinton, that second use of Bill Clinton, to be referring to the same person as the first use, yeah. And maybe you can do that just by saying, well, there's only one name, Bill Clinton. I mean, I got one name, Bill Clinton, and the only way you can use that name is to stand for that man. Yeah. If there's another Bill Clinton, that's actually a different name. Right? Sounds the same, spelt the same, but it's a different name. Yeah. That'd be one way of thinking of it. Yeah. Another way of thinking of it would be, I need some more context specification here. Bill Clinton, the name Bill Clinton, the sentence Bill Clinton, as used by me right now, refers is true if and only if. Sorry, the sentence Bill Clinton is a former president, as used by me right now, my referential intentions being what they are, is true if and only if, and then you can just use Bill Clinton the second time. Yeah, but okay, so there's room for a lot of complexity here, and indeed, a lot of the interest and a lot of the illumination in this approach is in just getting, although the examples I gave you right now were all very simple, you guys are rightly pointing out there's going to be a lot of complexity when you start looking at practically any bit of language. There's going to be a lot of complexity. And it's often extremely illuminating. I mean, it just feels illuminating to work through the details of how you generate the theory for, say, belief sentences or proper names or indexicals. Yeah. Yep. Yes, that's right. They would be considered different object languages. Yeah. I mean, you can use your common sense, if you see what I mean. You can say, well, from many purposes, it doesn't matter, the differences, yeah. Okay, so notice that there are infinitely many sentences in the language, yeah? So you can't have infinitely many sentences here. So classically, you need a theory that's going to have a finite set of axioms and generate all the yes is true if and only if P pairs for your target language. It's up to you to pause me if this doesn't make sense. Okay. So Davidson's idea was the way to specify the meanings of all the terms of a language is to give a truth theory for a language. So there you are, that's theory of meaning both senses of theory of meaning and the problem solved all in a single sentence. Right? That's what you do. And in first week, we had this very simple language, right? No indexicals, no ambiguous proper names, just two names, two people, right? Raleigh, Isaac, two predicates, smokes, fishes. How many sentences in the language? 4, very good, okay. And we can generate those 4 from axioms. Raleigh refers to Raleigh, Isaac refers to Isaac, smokes applies to X if and only if X smokes, fishes applies to X if and only if X fishes. And we can say in general, A is true if, so in first week I walked through this slowly with you, but are you happy to take my word for it that from this theory we can get the theorems Raleigh smokes is true if and only if Raleigh smokes? Yep. Isaac fishes is true if and only if Isaac fishes. Right. Okay. Now, the thing is, the reason this is worth going through is that simple frame, there are such a lot of moves you can make with respect to that simple frame. In that first lecture, where we went to from here was saying, well, the fundamental thing then is to understand reference. We want to know what reference means when we've got these axioms. What we came on to was giving a causal analysis of reference. And one way of thinking of what you're doing, the way of thinking that's really implicit in a lot of the work that went on with causal theories of reference, is to think, here's an analogy with chemistry. How many you guys do high school chemistry? Okay, well, here's how it used to be when I was in high school, right? In chemistry, well, back in the 19th century, they had lots of laws governing the combination of elements. Yeah? The proportions in which elements combine. Right? So you've got high-level laws about the ways elements combine. And the way chemistry did it was it gave each element a number, its valence number. Yeah? Now, no idea what that means physically, but each element's got a valence number, and from the valence numbers of two elements, you can predict the ratios in which they're going to combine. Yep. Yeah, that's kind of familiar. Yeah. So you've got high-level chemical laws, and now you want to know how does that connect to physics? And it was a big discovery that you can explain in physical terms what valence means. I mean, I can't remember exactly. It's something about gaps in the electron cloud in the outer shell, so, something like that. That's roughly it. Okay, thank you. Do you know exactly what it is?
Well, I don't know.
Okay, you can tell a bit more exactly than me. Okay.
Yeah, so basically the only electrons that are involved in bonding are those that are in the sort of highest energy level.
Right. That's the outer shell. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an old friend, the outer shell. Yes, right.
It's maybe not necessarily the outer shell in like a spatial sense.
Uh-huh.
But it's at least an outer shell like energy level.
Okay. Okay.
And so in order for bonding to happen, you have to have, or our normal type of bonding to happen, you have to have unpaired electrons.
Right.
When you have unpaired electrons, we have sort of gaps in the highest level.
Very good. Yeah.
So we found out that based on the way these electrons behave, that we have a gap.
Right. So that's what's happening when the two elements are combining. The unpaired electrons in the outer shells of the two substances are kind of getting together, and that's what explains ultimately why they combine in the ratios they do. Okay? Don't say you don't learn anything in this class. Okay, so there what happens is you get a high-level theory about the elements, the ratios in which the valences and the ratios in which they combine. And then you reduce chemistry to physics. Yeah? That's one of the reasons why Rutherford could say there's only physics and all the rest is stamp collecting. Chemistry turned out to be a branch of physics. It might have been impossible to do that, and then we'd have had a very weird situation where you say there are two kinds of facts about the world, the chemical facts and the physical facts, and we don't know the relation between them. Yeah, that would have been such a strange situation. But the reduction was given. Now, when you introduce the notion of reference, that's kind of like the notion of valence. That you can say valence is like reference in that we've got these high-level generalizations about how a bunch of terms with various references combine to give you sentences with particular truth conditions. But what's reference? How does this relate to physics? So similarly, we want to explain the reference condition in terms that connect to physics. And then the idea of naturalism is to explain reference in causal terms, just as you explain valence in terms of energy levels and electron shells and all that. Then you explain reference in causal terms, and now you've got a deep explanation of what's going on when all these terms combine. Hartree-Field was probably the first person to make this fully explicit and use that valence analogy. But it's really implicit in such a lot of the work. It seems to be implicit in Fodor stuff, for example. That's a picture of what he's trying to do. And you might say, well, maybe that can't be done. Just as for chemistry, it might have been impossible to reduce valence to physical terms. But as I said, with chemistry, it would have been a very weird situation if you couldn't do that. Yeah, two kinds of facts about the world, the chemical facts and the physical facts, and no connection between them. So if you say, well, you can't do this, as indeed we did say, or I did say earlier, you can't do this, then it is a strange situation. You've got these high-level generalizations about reference and truth conditions, and no understanding of how they connect to the basic physical reality. Okay? Yep.
But don't we still have lots of situations in sciences where sort of just have to be able to explain it along the way?
We'll be able to explain it sometime, but not.
If there was still uncertainty, then it could, for example, turn out that it was unexpected.
It could turn out, yes. But that would really be baffling, right? That would be mystifying. if that really happened. Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day who said he works on, I can't remember if I gave you this exact example before, but it really struck me. He works on the behavior of complex systems like waves in a fluid, right? So when you're trying to understand the behavior of waves in a fluid at the underlying molecular level, the thing is very, very complex, right? But his team have basically cracked it. They can explain what's going on when waves in a fluid or a turbulent liquid are interacting with each other. They can track each of the molecules and predict what's going on at the level of the wave. Yeah. So that's a real reductionist program where you might have thought, that's just too complicated, you're not going to do that. I asked him, what about something like monetary inflation going through a nation? Yeah, do you think ultimately you could reduce that to the molecular level? You know, a wave of inflation going through the whole economy? And he took a deep breath and said, yes, right? So there is that high-level program of saying the behavior of any system, however complex, can be understood in molecular terms. Yeah. So I think a lot of people have it as an article of faith, really, that that must be possible. Yeah. Yeah. Matter can be infinitely divided, yeah. Well, if the causal theory had been right, I mean, this is the way we set, or at any rate, I set things up at the start of term, yeah, to say we want some kind of truth theory, and for that to work, we want to know what reference is, and then we moved on to Frege on sense and reference, description theories, causal theories, yeah. So I don't think you could just say, well, matter's infinitely divisible, therefore a causal theory can't be right. Yeah, that wouldn't be convincing. Yeah. But Davidson takes things in a completely different direction. Davidson says the way that we were thinking of reference for those first 6 weeks or so was completely wrong. That was a complete waste of time, basically. Suppose you think about Ptolemaic astronomy. Ptolemaic astronomy, before Copernicus and Galileo and all that, people thought that the Earth is at the center of the solar system. Well, what we now call the solar system. The Earth is at the center of all the movements of the heavenly bodies. And all the heavenly bodies move in perfect circles. Yeah? And they'd been studying the night sky since Babylonian times. So they knew pretty well what you had to do to get a predictive theory. That if you imagine everything is going in perfect circles, then what you can do is say, well, since everything does not seem to be going in a single perfect circle, you can say that they're describing two circular motions simultaneously, going like this and going like this in a bigger trajectory. Yeah, and you can pile circular movements on circular movements until you get what's actually a descriptively correct set of predictions as to what you're going to see in the night sky on any given night. Yeah, so that was very sophisticated working out by the Middle Ages. But if you ask these guys, what do you think about these circular motions? Is that the dynamics of the heavens? The answer was no in the Middle Ages. They did not think that was the dynamics of the heavens. Talking about these circles upon circles was just a convenient fiction. It gave you a kind of abacus for predicting what the planets were going to do next. That was what the church suggested to Galileo. This is not really relevant, but incidentally, Galileo presented the theory of the Earth moving as the correct dynamical account, the correct causal account of what was going on with the relations between the Earth and the heavenly bodies. And the church said to Galileo, look, this is a great computational device. This is a great predictive device, just as good as the epicycles maybe. Why not say that? And Galileo refused to say that. He said, no, it's really moving. Yeah, that's the causal reality. That was the sticking point. But he could have said, no, it's just a great convenient fiction that will allow us to predict what we're going to see. And if you think of it like that, there would have been no real conflict between Galileo's theory and the Ptolemaic theory. Yeah, they're just two equally good ways of predicting the positions of the heavenly bodies. And if you think of astronomy like that, then if you talk about these epicyclic paths, or you talk about the movement of the Earth, there will be no reason to give no need to give any kind of physicalist reduction of these things. They are just convenient gadgets for predicting what you're going to see. The only hard fact is the position of the planets in the night sky, the observed position of these things in the night sky. So similarly, suppose you think of the theory of the statement of all the references of the terms in a language that lets you generate all the truth S is true if and only if P sentences for that language. You could think of the talk of reference there as just a convenient gadget for generating truth conditions. You could say there are no hard facts about reference at all. All I've got here is a kind of abacus that lets me calculate what the truth conditions of any sentence in the language will be. And then you wouldn't need to bother with Frege's stuff on sense and reference. You wouldn't need to bother with causal theories of reference. You don't need a physicalist account of what reference is. There will be no difference between any two. If you had two different accounts of the references of all the terms in a language that generated all the same truth conditions, they'd be saying just the same thing. Yeah. No difference between any two theories concerning references that make the same predictions about the truth conditions of the sentence. And then you just don't need any account of what reference is. Yeah? Because the notion of reference is entirely explained by its role in generating truth conditions. It's just a bit of gas to let you generate truth conditions. Yeah? It's just it's junk, really. It's junk that lets you do the calculation. So I gave that theory for Raleigh and Isaac and fishes and smokes. Look, here's a different theory for Raleigh and Isaac and fishes and smokes. Suppose you said, not Raleigh refers to Raleigh, but Raleigh refers to the place 1 mile west of Raleigh. Okay, follow me very closely here. Here's a different theory for our language, right? Raleigh refers to the place 1 mile west of Raleigh. Isaac refers to a place, not even to a person, but to a place 1 mile west of Isaac. Yeah? And here's the axioms for the predicates. The predicate smokes applies to a place if the person 1 mile east of that place smokes, right? So if you've got a place and you're saying of that place that it smokes, then that place, the predicate will apply to that place if the person 1 mile east of that place smokes, right? And similarly for fishes, fishes will apply to a place if the person 1 mile east of that place fishes. So put these together. Raleigh, here's, let me draw this for you. Here is Raleigh, right? There we are, there's Raleigh. Here is the place, yes? So Raleigh refers to this place, yep? And smokes applies to this place if and only if the person 1 mile east of this place smokes. Yeah. So Raleigh smokes will be true if and only if person Raleigh smokes. Yes? Look at that. Isn't that great? Raleigh smokes is true if and only if Raleigh smokes. Yeah? I mean, I could walk through Isaac Fisher's too, if you like, but you see that Isaac Fisher's is going to come out true if and only if Isaac Fisher's. Yeah, you're just tracking backwards and forwards from this place. Yeah? Now, if reference is a real notion, if you see what I mean, if reference is talking about a bit of reality, like a causal theory, as a causal theory or a sense approach had in mind, then these are quite different theories, right? These are saying quite different things about what Raleigh and Isaac refers to. Yeah? So one's talking about a causal relation between a place, and the other one would be talking about a causal relation between a person and the sign. But Davison says these two theories, there is no difference between them. All that reference is for generating talk about truth conditions of whole sentences. So if any two theories, this is like Galileo and his competitors, right? They're just two different gadgets. They're cranking out the same set of truth conditions. So there is no real difference between them. There is an empirical content for the astronomical theories at the level of observations, what you're going to see in the night sky. But the analog is that the hard facts about language are the truth conditions of whole sentences. There aren't hard facts about reference. There's no fact of the matter about whether the name Raleigh refers to the person or to the place 1 mile west of Raleigh, or, I mean, once you get the idea here, I could obviously just keep on doing this, right? 2 miles west of Raleigh, the mountain nearest Raleigh, right? You can just keep doing that. There's no fact of the matter about what any term refers to. What we did at the start of the class was all built on the assumption that there are facts of the matter about reference. The suggestion here is there are no facts of the matter about reference. The reason it seemed so difficult was that we didn't have a subject. Yes?
It seems kind of strange though that it still seems like you still keep going and even all of those different theories you still say something like, oh but wait a minute, is there a unique reference point where someone's 1 mile away from this location or they might have to get to another person in that location? Or you keep saying like how does the causal link get established with that particular point in place? And it still seems like that makes sense. Because it seems like the idea is connected is sort of trying to blow out if even bothering thinking about whether it's a causal theory or like a descriptive theory.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it is trying to do that. It's trying to blow up that whole dispute and say that that was a fake dispute between, for example, causal and descriptive theories.
But it still seems like the question still remains, even if you say, okay, it's irrelevant which one I choose, but
Right.
whichever one I choose, these questions still seem significant.
Yeah, but why is that? I mean, there's no causal relation, let's suppose, between the speaker and the place 1 mile west of Raleigh. Yeah. Why would causal connections matter? Yeah. All you're doing, certainly causal connections between individual words and aspects of the environment don't matter. We're not looking for them at all. You couldn't refute this theory by saying, but he's not causally, the speaker wasn't causally connected to the place 1 mile west of Raleigh. 1, 2. Yeah. That's right.
And then I could look at the different ones that are made available, like this rotational one or this weird one, and just have certain desiderata. For example, maybe I just think like Hutton does, and the theory is probably magical, and that's just how. But
Yeah.
that's ridiculous. And we don't want magical theories of forever. Then it seems like I blew up this one.
Yeah, but I mean, one of Galileo's competitors could have done the same. They say, well, there's the epicyclic theory and there's a theory that the Earth moves, but a theory that bodies move in anything other than perfect circles is kind of a magical theory. How could that happen? Therefore, I reject Galileo's theory. Yeah, I mean, all right. This is an expression of personal taste. That's all. It's not that there's a fact in the matter about one of them being right. Yeah.
I'm not sure how you can generate the right truth conditions in meta language without having a theory of reference in place. So like
It wasn't picking. Raleigh always refers to a place on what has just pejoratively been called the weird theory. Yeah, it always refers to a place. Yeah, but the predicate is true of a place if and only if the person east of that place smokes. It's just identified as the person 1 mile east of X. This is the meta language. This is the theorists in the meta language specifying which person is relevant here, the person 1 mile east of the place. Well, it's a description, right? So it's in the meta language, right? So presumably it's a quantifier phrase. But it, Raleigh refers to a place. Raleigh, that's right. Yeah. That's all right. Stop me. It really is worth thinking about this. It's worth, it's really worth going through the hoops in this, because I've stated that very fast and schematically. And it is a good question whether you can really do this. You know, it's fine for 2 sentences, for 2 words and 2 names and 2 predicates. It's obviously going to get a lot more complex as we look at richer languages. Yep.
I mean, are there some cases of theory choice, at least certainly in science, where it's not just a matter of personal taste?
Oh yes, yes,
Like,
sure,
it seems
sure.
like in science, right, we prefer theories not just on the basis of whether or not they're true, but in terms of how many entities they postulate and
Yep.
how sort of similar descriptions of the actual world are and things like that. Is there a reason why we couldn't rule out theories of reference in the same way, or explanations of reference in the same way?
Well, good. It's just important to be clear about what kind of theory, what kind of conflict we're dealing with here. If it is a conflict between 2 computational fiction, 2 convenient fictions or computation, yeah, then you don't want to get too fired up about it. And physicists do sometimes regard rival theories as like that. We've got one notation we use for describing the situation here, and it gives all correct predictions. We give another way that looks quite different at describing the situation here. It gives the same predictions. We don't want to have to choose. We just use whichever one is handier for the purpose at the hand. Yeah. One. Yeah. Very good. That's true. You can't rule it out that one's going to predict better than the other. Yeah. Yes, right. And if you have 2 that are both convenient and both work exactly the same, yeah, that give exactly the same predictions, then there's no fact to the matter whether one's right and the other's wrong. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's the key thing, right? That's what actually I, at any rate, would resist in Davidson. Yeah. I think this is a terrible theory. Yeah. This can't be right. But I am willing to give him, for the purposes of arguments, that it generates exactly the same truth conditions as the other theory. You see what I mean? I think there's a fact of the matter that goes beyond that. So I don't mean that to kind of lay down the law, but just to say, what you say is fine, yeah, but there's really an issue about whether that's true. Yeah, yeah. But what you're saying is exactly what Davidson would say. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I was wondering, you're not even really allowed to use the language of saying calling it convenient fiction, or defining it as fiction.
Okay, it's convenient and it's not a truth, right? If you see what I mean. I agree. There's something a bit strange about calling it a fiction, but the point is, it looks like there's something for which truth or falsity might arise, and it's not. Yeah. Fiction might not be the right word for that, but it gives the flavour. Yeah, it's in the right direction. Is that fair? Is that catching what you meant? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Did you have a question? Yes.
Well, I was just thinking, so it seems like two sentences can have the same truth condition in that, like, they can always be true at the same time as the so, like, a triangle presented or form.
Very good.
They're always
Yeah.
true. It's
Yeah.
not like they can just be different sentences.
Yes. Okay. Different sentences. Exactly. That puts a lot of pressure on exactly what concept of truth condition you have in mind. Yeah. One way to think of truth condition is in terms of possible worlds. So if they're true, two sentences of the same truth condition, if they're true in just the same possible worlds. Yeah. And your point is we need something finer than that. Yeah, because actually even for Hesperus is Hesperus and Hesperus is Phosphorus, they would come out as having the same truth conditions, yeah, on that picture. We want something finer, so I agree. But, okay, actually, that, but what about that? If I've got if and only if Raleigh smokes,
So in the object language, we're talking about a place, heading is built in a place, and in the meta language, we're talking about a person.
yes, that's right. Yeah, the meta language is talking about a real person. Yeah, Raleigh and saying that he smokes.
Yeah, those surely those
Uh,
are different compositions.
what you're saying in the meta language and what you're saying, well, the meta language, the sentence Raleigh smokes will be true. Is true. Yeah.
Yeah. They'll read true at the same time.
Yes. Yeah. But you want something better than that. Yeah.
What we're considering is not Raleigh smokes is true on the one hand and Raleigh smokes on the other, right? We're considering like Raleigh smokes is true on the one hand and the place a mile west of Raleigh is a mile east of this smokes.
Okay. So there's an issue about whether you're getting the same truth. You're really getting the same truth condition.
Well, I mean, maybe it is the same truth condition, but it's not in that sense in which, you know,
In your sense.
society is
Yeah.
putting on about things that they want to do.
Yeah. So you're amplifying that last question. Yeah. 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 Okay. That's fair enough. We'll come on to this next time. I'll try and say a bit more next time about what the correct Davisonian response to that would be, I think. But just to place mark it, that the question would be, how do the differences you're talking about show up in actual linguistic behavior? If you think about the hard facts to which you're responsible, suppose you're just parachuted into some foreign land of which you know nothing, and they speak a language that has nothing to do with any language you know, then what are the hard facts you're looking at to which you have to be responsive in specifying these truth conditions for the statements of the language? And whatever the hard facts there are, will they really make the discriminations that you're after? Yeah, that's the basic question. Yeah. Okay, so let me just work through Davidson's picture of what reference is. There's a remark that goes back to Frege. It's only the context of a sentence that words have meaning, and that's to say, it's only when you can only do things in a language with sentences. I mean, if I just say letterbox, well, what you would say is, well, surely that needs a verb. You see what I mean? You can't actually do anything in a language unless, of course, sometimes you can use a particular word as short for a whole sentence, but it's got to be a sentence before you can say something or make a command or request something. There's got to be a sentence there. So words have meaning only insofar as they let sentences do their job. Here's Davidson. Words have no function save as they play a role in sentences. The semantic features of words are just abstractions from the semantic features of sentences. What Davidson calls the building block method. He says it is often called the building block method. I have never heard anyone calling it the building block method except Davidson. But anyway, the building block method was having explained directly, and without talking about sentences, having explained directly, and this is what we were doing in the first part of the class, having explained directly the semantic features of proper names and simple predicates, we would go on to explain the references of complex singular terms and complex predicates. You know, terms like the father of Raleigh or the grandfather of Raleigh, you see what I mean, and so on. And then finally we'd explain truth. This is often called the building block theory. It has often been tried, and it is hopeless. Right? You just can't start out with reference and work up to truth. Yeah?
What about when you say you're across, you're like in a crowded room,
Yeah.
and like you see your friend across the
Yeah.
room, and you just shout out, like,
Oi, yes, right, yes. Over here. I guess the idea is, yeah, that's elliptical for something like I'm over here, which really is a sentence. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, always with language, if you're doing something distinctively linguistic, then it can be expressed as a sentence. Davison says, we explain macroscopic phenomena by postulating an unobserved fine structure. So the macroscopic phenomena are how you use language in ordinary conversation and talking. And we postulate this underlying set of references for all the terms. But the theory is going to be tested at the macroscopic level. And what he's really appealing to is an instrumentalist conception of microphysics, right? He's saying the unobserved fine structure, that only has meaning by being connected to what's going on at the macroscopic level. So when I stated the axioms for a theory of truth at the start, yeah, when I said Raleigh refers to Raleigh and so on, I said how this talk about truth, how this talk about reference is going to connect to truth. Actually, that already explained the notion of reference. You already knew all there was to know about reference when you understood how it operates to characterize truth. There is no more to understand about reference than that, its connection to truth conditions. We just make a mistake when we think we can go deeper into it. We can look for causal theories or description theories or whatever. We know all there is to know about the concept of reference when we know how it operates to characterize truth. We don't need the concept of reference at all. We don't need reference itself, whatever that may be. Reference drops out. It plays no essential role in explaining the relation between language and reality. And on that note, we'll pause for today. Okay, thanks guys.